The small family-run restaurant was nothing glamorous, but it had been my sanctuary for years. I had inherited it from my parents, who'd built it from the ground up with love and hard work. The scent of freshly brewed coffee and sizzling breakfast specials filled the air every morning, creating humble warmth that was both comforting and familiar. Most of the time, I was content in a way that only came from knowing you were doing something meaningful, even if it wasn't recognized by everyone. But not by him. I watched as my brother entered the restaurant one afternoon, fresh from his latest corporate meeting. His tailored suit and polished shoes seemed to mock the rustic charm of my cafe. He walked in with the confidence that only someone who had everything could exude. His eyes scanned the place dismissively, as though it was too beneath him to even acknowledge properly. And then, with a scoff and a smirk on his face, he made the comment that would set the course for everything that came after. "Still running a small restaurant," he sneered, as if I were still stuck in some kind of embarrassing phase. His tone dripped with arrogance, so certain of his success and superiority as a corporate executive. His words stung, but I refused to let him see the effect they had on me. There was a split second where I almost said something, almost allowed my anger to spill over, to scream at him that I was proud of what I had built, that what he saw as small was my life's work. But then I stopped. I kept quiet. In that moment, I felt small, trapped in my own emotions. But at the same time, something inside me stirred, a quiet resolve that whispered, "I'll show you." As he turned to leave, lost in his own world of business talk, I couldn't help but reflect on the difference between our lives. There he was, climbing the corporate ladder, basking in the approval of his bosses and investors. And here I was, running my restaurant, making sure every customer walked out with a smile, investing my time and soul into every dish I prepared. To him, my life seemed insignificant. To me, it was everything. I swallowed the words that burned the back of my throat. He didn't deserve the satisfaction of seeing me break. He had no idea that my dreams were bigger than he could ever imagine. I had always kept my plans to myself. I wasn't going to let anyone diminish them, not even him. He couldn't see the vision I had, the potential I knew was there in this little place. But I could, and one day he would too. So I kept my mouth shut and nodded politely as he left, but the truth was clear in my mind. I was no longer going to let him make me feel small. I was going to build something even bigger, and I wasn't going to do it for him or anyone else. I was going to do it for me. Little did he know, my quiet ambition was about to surprise him. Growing up, our house was never the picture of harmony. It was a house filled with expectations, pressure, and unspoken words. My brother, Alex, had always been the golden child. He was the one who excelled at everything he touched, the one whose achievements lit up the entire room. I was the quieter one, the one who preferred to fade into the background. Our parents, loving as they were, couldn't help but compare us. They would always praise Alex for his academic brilliance, his drive, and his potential. On the other hand, I was simply the quiet one who had a knack for cooking. But that wasn't all I was. I had big dreams, dreams that were bigger than just cooking meals in the back of a small kitchen. From a young age, I had always envisioned myself running something much bigger than a small family restaurant. I wasn't just making food for people. I wanted to build an empire. But those dreams felt foolish. Whenever I shared my ideas, they were met with mild smiles or silence. My family never took them seriously. They always saw me as the one who stayed behind, the one who didn't reach for the stars the way Alex did. It was no surprise when Alex decided to follow the path laid out for him. Law school, corporate internships, and eventually landing a top position at a prestigious firm. Everyone hailed him as the future of our family. And I stayed in the background, silently working towards something that was always deemed insignificant. I worked at local restaurants, saved every penny, and learned every aspect of the business. I taught myself to manage, cook, and handle everything the restaurant required. My parents never asked how things were going, and if they did, it was always with the expectation that I was doing this for fun. But it wasn't for fun. Every day I spent at that small restaurant, scrubbing the floors, handling the accounts, preparing the food, everything I did was with purpose. I was building something from scratch. Slowly, the dream I had as a child, the one I kept tucked away in my heart, was taking form. It wasn't much to look at yet, just a modest little place, serving simple but quality meals to those who appreciated them. But it was mine, and it was growing. But no one saw it, not even my family. They saw it as a stepping stone. It's a phase, my mother would say. You'll outgrow this, just like you outgrew all your other hobbies. It hurt. The absence of support was painful, but what hurt even more was the constant comparison to Alex. No matter how hard I worked, it was never enough. I would overhear them telling others, Alex is going to be the one who changes our lives. I didn't let it stop me. Instead, I let it fuel me. While Alex moved up the corporate ladder, I built my own foundation, quietly working towards something bigger. The pain of being overlooked, of having my dreams dismissed, never left me. But with each passing day, the fire inside me only grew stronger. I wasn't going to stop just because my family didn't believe in me. In the silence of the night, when I closed the restaurant doors after another long day, I would look at the small space and imagine what it could become, what I could become. I was done waiting for validation. I was done hiding my dreams. One day, I would show them what I was capable of without ever needing to say a word. The family gathering was meant to be a simple occasion, just dinner at my parents' house. A chance to catch up, to relax, or so I thought. But, as usual, my brother Alex was the center of attention. His latest achievements were the talk of the evening. Everyone praised him for his promotion at work, his new corporate connections, and how he was climbing the ladder just as they all knew he would. Meanwhile, I sat there, silently stirring my drink, pretending to be engaged in the conversation while feeling the weight of the unspoken comparisons. It wasn't that I resented him for his success. It was more that I was suffocated by the constant reminder that I was the one who had settled. You're still running that little restaurant of yours? Alex mocked, a smirk spreading across his face. His tone, dripping with condescension, made my blood boil. I mean, come on. It's cute and all, but let's face it, it's not going anywhere. You might want to think about getting a real job. The words hit harder than I expected. I had learned to deal with Alex's superiority over the years. His offhand comments were almost expected by now, but this one felt different. It wasn't just a casual jab, it was a dismissal of everything I had worked for. The small restaurant that I had poured my heart and soul into, the business I had built from nothing, was nothing more than a joke to him. His words were a stark reminder that no matter how much I achieved, I would always be the one who didn't make it. As I sat there, forcing a smile, I could feel my insides burning with humiliation. The sting of his mockery dug deeper than I cared to admit. Everyone else at the table laughed along, but I could barely hear them over the sound of my own racing thoughts. My mind was clouded with anger. I had worked so hard to get to this point. Every night, every day, working until my body ached, constantly sacrificing my time and energy, only for him to belittle me as if my dreams were insignificant. For a brief moment, I wanted to lash out, to tell him exactly how I felt, to tell him how I had quietly endured years of his condescending remarks and how his success had never come without leaving a trail of pain behind. I wanted to expose the truth, that his life had been handed to him while I had fought tooth and nail for every inch of progress I made. But as the words lingered on the tip of my tongue, I swallowed them down. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing me lose control. I wasn't going to let him provoke me. Instead, I did what I had always done. I stayed silent. But this time something in me shifted. The old feeling of being small, of accepting his superiority, was gone. I could feel a resolve building inside me. The moment he mocked me, something clicked. I was done allowing him to belittle me, done being the one who was always overlooked. But my retaliation wasn't going to be loud. It wasn't going to be dramatic. It was going to be quiet. The kind of revenge that didn't need words to be powerful. I kept my head down, forced a smile, and silently promised myself that I would prove him wrong. The best revenge, I decided, would be to build my success, quietly and fiercely. I would let my achievements speak for themselves. The next time Alex saw me, he wouldn't be able to ignore what I had become. But for now, I would stay quiet, silent, dignified, and focused. And one day, he would see exactly what I had built. The next few months passed in a blur. Every day felt like an uphill battle, but I was no longer afraid of the struggle. I had made a vow to myself, and I wasn't going to back down. What Alex hadn't realized when he mocked me was that it wasn't just about the restaurant anymore. It was about my dignity, my worth, and my silent resolve to prove that I could achieve something far greater than anyone especially him, could ever imagine. I started taking calculated risks with the restaurant. I put my savings into revamping the interior, making it more upscale and sophisticated. It was a gamble, but the chance of success made the risk feel like a necessary move. Every dollar that went into the restaurant was earned with sweat and sacrifice. I knew I couldn't afford to fail, not because of the money, but because of the dream I was building. This was bigger than just food and service. It was about establishing a legacy, a business that would stand for something greater than the man who had belittled me. I worked tirelessly. The days blurred together. Mornings spent overseeing operations, afternoons negotiating with suppliers, and nights spent handling accounts and menu planning. My personal life? It was non-existent. I stopped meeting friends for coffee, stopped attending family gatherings, and even stopped caring about the loneliness that began to creep into my life. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. There were countless nights when I'd stay up late, brainstorming new ideas or figuring out how to cut costs while maintaining quality. There were days I went without eating simply because I was too busy to remember my own needs. No one knew how hard I was working. No one knew the countless hours I spent, the relationships I sacrificed, the emotional toll it took on me. But I never complained. I never asked for sympathy. I didn't need anyone's pity. All I wanted was to succeed, to prove that I was more than the small, overlooked woman Alex had once mocked. But there were moments, dark moments, when I thought about giving up. The pressure was immense. There were days when it felt like the weight of the world was on my shoulders. I questioned myself, my decisions, my worth. Was this all worth it? Was it even possible to succeed in a world that had always expected me to stay small? It was in those moments of doubt that I reminded myself of what I had promised. I remembered the mockery, the hurt, the way I had felt in that moment when Alex's words cut deeper than anything else. That memory fueled me. It gave me the strength to push forward, to ignore the voice that told me to quit, and to continue building my empire, silently, steadily, relentlessly. And slowly, over time, the restaurant transformed. It grew beyond my expectations. What had once been a small, modest establishment began to attract attention. Word spread about the food, the atmosphere, and the service. More customers came in, and with each success, I felt a renewed sense of pride. I wasn't just building a business. I was building something that was becoming a symbol of my resilience, my growth, and my refusal to be overlooked. As the months turned into years, the restaurant blossomed into a true enterprise. But what I had gained wasn't just financial success, it was a transformation. I went from being a woman unsure of her place in the world to someone with a clear vision and unwavering determination. I was no longer insecure. I had learned to trust myself, to recognize my own worth, and to understand that success wasn't about waiting for someone's approval. It was about believing in yourself, no matter how silent the journey may be. The day had started like any other. The restaurant buzzed with its usual energy. Servers darting between tables, chefs orchestrating the kitchen with precision, and the hum of conversation filling the air. It was a typical Thursday, but today something felt different. The air had an electric charge, like everything was about to change. I didn't know it yet, but today would be the day everything would come full circle. I was in the kitchen, overseeing the preparation of a new dish we were planning to introduce on the menu. The door swung open, and in walked a group of well-dressed individuals, one of them immediately catching my eye. He was a man with a strong presence, his suit impeccable, and his demeanor confident. I didn't need to ask who he was. His aura alone told me this was someone important. Then I saw him, Alex, my brother. He was standing in the corner, looking at the man with an expression I couldn't quite place. Shock? Disbelief? It was as if time slowed down, and I could see his face change from confusion to recognition in the blink of an eye. The realization hit him like a freight train. The man he had been dealing with, his top client, had just walked into my restaurant. This wasn't just any restaurant. It was the upscale establishment I had painstakingly built from the ground up. This was the culmination of years of hard work, sacrifices, and silent ambition. And now here he was, the very client Alex had so proudly flaunted in front of me all those months ago, now dining in the very place I had created. The client sat down, and I moved toward him with a polite smile, eager to offer him the best service I could. As I approached, I noticed Alex lingering by the entrance, his eyes wide, as if he were trying to figure out what was happening. I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction wash over me. I had worked so hard to get to this point, to prove that I could stand on my own without anyone's approval. And here it was, right in front of me. As I passed by my brother, I caught a glimpse of his expression. His eyes were wide, his jaw slightly slack. The arrogance he had once carried so confidently had vanished, replaced by something I couldn't quite place. Was it regret? Embarrassment? It didn't matter. The man he had mocked, the woman he had belittled, was now the owner of a thriving business. It wasn't just a restaurant, it was an empire, and it was mine. The client's laughter echoed through the room as he enjoyed his meal, completely unaware of the tension that had settled in the air. But I noticed a shift in my brother. He was no longer the corporate executive with the smug smile, the one who had ridiculed me for daring to dream big. Now he was the one who looked small, out of place, and unsure of himself. As the evening wore on, Alex quietly slipped out of the restaurant, his client oblivious to the storm of emotions brewing just a few feet away. I watched him go, his retreating figure a stark contrast to the man he had once been, and I felt a small, silent victory settle in my chest. I didn't need to say a word. The look on his face, the way he had seen the reality of my success, was enough. He had realized that his mockery, his arrogance, had been wrong all along. And in that moment, I knew I had won, not with loud words or grand gestures, but with quiet determination. The evening unfolded in a way that was almost surreal. The dining room was buzzing with laughter and clinking glasses. But for me, it felt as though time had stopped. I moved through the restaurant with a calmness I hadn't anticipated. Every step I took, every movement I made felt deliberate. But there was no anger in my heart, no desire for confrontation. It was just a quiet understanding settling within me, a sense of peace that, for the first time, I truly felt in control. I had imagined this moment in my head countless times over the years. I had envisioned confronting my brother, demanding an apology, calling him out for every harsh word, every mocking laugh. But in reality, none of that seemed necessary. The truth was too loud to be ignored. The restaurant, the success, the quiet empire I had built, it all spoke for itself. No amount of words could convey the depth of what I had accomplished better than the simple fact that I stood here today. My brother's face still lingered in my mind. I had watched him for so long as he reveled in his corporate world, all the while underestimating me, dismissing my dream as a fleeting whim. But the roles had shifted now. There was no need for me to say anything for him to know exactly what had transpired. He could feel it. His arrogance, once so thick, was now replaced by something more vulnerable, something he couldn't hide. I caught glimpses of him trying to maintain composure. As the evening went on, I noticed him glancing over at me, then quickly looking away. His client continued to enjoy his meal, completely unaware of the growing tension at the table. I could tell that my brother was trying to salvage his pride. He laughed a little too loud at his client's jokes and made exaggerated gestures, trying to mask the discomfort creeping into his posture. But it was all in vain. The contrast between his earlier self-assured demeanor and the quiet realization of how wrong he had been was impossible to miss. There was no need for me to rub it in. I didn't need to approach him and remind him of all the times he mocked my ambitions. I didn't need to remind him of the years I spent proving myself, quietly working while he had been flaunting his success. The truth stood in the space between us, in the silence that stretched longer than any words could. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. The shock on his face was palpable, but only for a moment. He had built a life where he felt superior, and now he was forced to reckon with the reality of my success. And I was content to let him experience this moment alone. He had spent years diminishing me, and now he would feel the weight of his own actions in a way that no shouting or accusations ever could. I watched him for a little longer, his attempts to save face becoming more desperate. He tried to laugh it off, tried to continue his conversation with his client as if nothing had changed. But I could see it, his eyes flickering toward me, the tension in his shoulders, his stilted movements. In his silence, I could hear everything he wasn't saying. And in that silence, I knew I had won. It was a power shift without a single word exchanged. No angry confrontation, no need for an apology. Just the quiet strength of a woman who had worked tirelessly to prove her worth. and the realization that sometimes silence speaks louder than anything else. As I stood in the quiet of my office, my eyes gazing out across the city that I now owned a piece of, I couldn't help but let my thoughts wander back to the beginning. It wasn't just the restaurants, the success, or the empire I had built that mattered most to me now. It was the journey, the painful, quiet, often lonely journey that had shaped me into the woman I was today. There had been so many moments along the way where I doubted myself, where I wondered if I was foolish to keep pushing forward while the world seemed to laugh behind my back. There were nights I cried myself to sleep, exhausted from running a business that felt more like a battle than a dream. The constant weight of having no one to turn to, not even the people who were supposed to care the most, my family. Yet, through it all, there had been a quiet voice inside of me, one that refused to give up. It wasn't a loud, brash voice. It wasn't the kind that demanded recognition or validation. It was soft, almost a whisper, telling me to keep going, even when it seemed like no one believed in me. Now, looking at the fruits of my labor, I realized how far I had come. My success wasn't just about the businesses I owned or the wealth I had accumulated. It wasn't even about proving my brother wrong. It was about something deeper, about finally understanding my own strength. The woman I had become was someone who no longer relied on anyone else's approval. I had spent so much of my life looking for validation, from my family, from my brother, from the world around me. But now that need had vanished. I had learned to validate myself. The pain of the past, the mockery, the neglect, the constant comparisons to my brother had all faded into something unrecognizable. It wasn't that the memories didn't still hurt, but I had learned to turn that hurt into something powerful. I had used it to fuel my growth, not my resentment. I was no longer defined by the opinions of others. I had come to realize that I didn't need anyone's approval to know my worth. And most importantly, I didn't need my brother or my family to acknowledge my success for me to feel proud of what I had achieved. I thought back to the times when I had wished for my brother's approval, when I had longed for a word of encouragement or support. But now that longing was gone. I understood that his mockery wasn't a reflection of my failure, but a reflection of his inability to see beyond his own narrow view of success. I had spent so long trying to fit into a mold that was never meant for me. I had tried to play by rules that weren't my own. But now I was building my own rules, rules that worked for me, rules that didn't require anyone else's permission. The anger that had once festered inside me, toward my brother, my family, even toward myself, had dissolved into something more serene. I no longer held resentment. What had once been a burning fire inside of me was now the calm warmth of understanding. I didn't need to shout from the rooftops about my success. I didn't need to show anyone how far I had come. The life I had built was enough. The quiet strength I had found was all the recognition I needed. I had reached a point where I no longer cared if my family ever acknowledged my success. They could keep their judgments and comparisons. I no longer sought their approval. I had learned that true success was not about the recognition from others. It was about the peace I had found within myself. The transformation was complete. I had become the person I was always meant to be, not defined by anyone else's expectations, but by my own quiet, unshakable strength. Months passed since that unforgettable day when my brother had walked into my restaurant and the world as he knew it shifted. The once proud corporate executive who had ridiculed my small family restaurant and dismissed my dreams was now humbly watching me take control of the very world he had so confidently dismissed. I heard the whispers of regret in his voice when he first tried to reach out. It started with a simple apologetic message, followed by more calls. He tried to soften the blow, as if expecting me to respond in the way I once would have, eager for his approval, craving his recognition. But now, I was no longer the same woman who had longed for his validation. I had learned that the silence I had embraced was far more powerful than any words of reconciliation could be. At first, there was a part of me that wanted to respond, to let him know how deeply he had hurt me, to finally stand up for all the years of being overlooked, dismissed, and belittled. But then I realized that the best response was no response at all. I didn't need to say anything. My actions had already spoken louder than any words ever could. The business empire I had built with my own two hands, the strength I had forged in silence, was the ultimate testament to my success, and it needed no further explanation. Each time he reached out, I felt a mix of emotions. There was no joy in seeing him beg for forgiveness. It was a quiet, bittersweet reminder that what I had achieved wasn't just a victory for me, but a reckoning for him. For so long, I had allowed myself to be defined by my family's expectations and my brother's arrogance. But now I was free. Free from the need for approval, free from the chains of comparison, and most importantly, free from his mockery. I had let go of the idea that my worth was tied to their validation. I no longer needed them to recognize my success because, in the end, I had already recognized it for myself. And that was the greatest peace I could ever find. The peace that came from knowing that I had proven myself not through words or gestures, but through quiet strength and relentless perseverance. I had built my own life, my own success, and it was no longer tied to anyone's approval but my own. Sometimes the loudest revenge is silence. That quote resonated within me as I thought about everything I had endured, everything I had worked for, and how my silence had become my most potent form of retribution. I had never shouted to make my point. I had never demanded attention. Instead, I let my actions do the talking, and now my success was the most resounding reply to every mocking word, every doubtful glance. As I sat in my office that evening, watching the lights of the city flicker below, I realized that my journey was finally complete. I had achieved everything I had dreamed of and more. I had created a life that was mine, built from the ground up without anyone's help or approval. And most importantly, I had found peace within myself, a peace that had eluded me for so long. My brother's attempts to reconnect no longer affected me. His regret, his apologies, they were just a part of his journey, not mine. I had moved on, and the life I had now was a reflection of my strength, not my family's expectations. I had learned to live for myself, to own my success without apology. And in doing so, I had found the closure I had been searching for all along.